You're listening to the home of cool, irreverent, and entertaining talk. Right here on LA Talk Radio. You're listening to Question Reality. Question Reality. With Priscilla Leona. Priscilla Leona. Only on LA Talk Radio.
Hi, I'm Priscilla Leona, and welcome to Question Reality. I am the host, as you know, and we are coming to you again, live from LA Talk radio station in beautiful downtown Los Angeles. You don't want to be anywhere else but LA if you are pursuing a career in entertainment. Well, maybe possibly New York, but that's more theater. We are on every Sunday from 5 to 5:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and our show is about informative entertainment. So what that means is our goal to provide you with resource information, tricks of the trade, everything that you need in order to pursue a career in the entertainment business. Hopefully, we want to inspire you, we want to encourage you, we want to motivate you, and we do that by interviewing people who are currently making their dream a reality in show business. We have people at all different levels. We have producers, directors, writers, actors, singers, dancers, models, musicians, variety performers, and some fire eaters, which we've recently acquired. Yeah, it's turning into a three-ring circus over here. We encourage you to call in and ask questions of our guests between 5:15 and 5:30, and you can call if you're not at your computer and you want to call but you just don't want to be at your computer. Write this number down. It's 323-203-0815, 323-203-0815. And we don't have you go through a screening process, which is fantastic. You will be directly on the air. You don't have to give any information. Just call, get your dime out. Is it a dime or 50 cents now? Oh my God, I think it's 50 cents. No, I think it's 50 now. And call us. Pull over on the side of the road. If your battery's dead, find a phone. If you liked our show and you found that it was helpful in any way, we would love to hear about it on the forum. We have a forum page on the LATalkRadio.com website. And if you're looking at the website now, you see a little link and it says forum, and you want to click on that, and it only takes a minute to register. You just need an email address, and that's it. You're done. And you can say, oh my God, I loved Priscilla Leona, or I loved Question Rally, or I found this topic great, or I loved ARUN VIR, or VIR. She's going to kill me. She's our guest, but I just can't pronounce that name, but she's going to help us. And then if you also want to find out who our upcoming guests are, go to our website directly. It's questionreality.us, not .com, questionreality.us for United States. And you can see the people that are going to be on the show next. And we have a wonderful celebrity, which I'm hoping that we can have on our show shortly. I'm waiting to hear back from her, but it was a great experience. I'll just tell you a little bit about it. I went on an audition because, as everyone knows, I am this hot, sexy, voluptuous actress, as well as producer, director, writer. We could go on and on, but it's okay. So I went to my agent. JR sent me on the audition, and it was for Life, which is a show on, God, is it CBS? Oh, Jesus. It's on one of those network shows. Anyway, I walk into the audition. Oh, my God, am I surrounded by all of these famous character actresses, and I'm thinking right away, okay, I'm never going to book this, but I'm going to schmooze, I'm going to network, and I'm going to try to see if I can get them on my show. So I see this woman who I love. She is like one of my favorite character actresses, and she was on a show called Boston Public, and she was only on there to, this is an inspirational story, because she was only hired to do one line in on the show. I believe it was one line, and she nailed this line. It was, and I can't remember verbatim what it was, but I think it goes like this. She was on Boston Public, and she had a scene with the vice principal. Was it Goober? Or Gruber, I cannot remember, but her line was, it was about her son, I believe, that was suspended, and she says, takes her shoe off and says, "Smell this shoe. This is the smell of injustice." And she nailed that, and it was just, she made it her own. I mean, she had just such power in that one line, that one scene, that I guess they fell in love with her, and they got a great response back, and then they made her a regular on the show. So that is a very inspirational story for you going out on auditions, because you might just have one line, but it could end up being something that's going to catapult you into a world of success, as it has her. She's just been on so many shows now, cannot even tell you. Her name is Cleo King, and she's a lovely woman. She was so friendly, and I just had to introduce myself to her, and I looked her up, got in contact with her, emailed her. She emailed me back, and I'm waiting to hear back, but I'm hoping that she'll be a guest on an upcoming show, and she's so inspirational and just a lovely woman. So we might have Cleo King coming on, so I will keep you updated on that. Now, without further ado, is it ado or ado? We have a great guest for you today. And again, her name is, ARUN VIR. ARUN. Okay, it's spelled ARUNVIR. So there are many ways you could pronounce it, but we have her on the show today. She is a writer, producer, director. She won an award from AFI's Directors Workshop. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, it's American Film Institute, which is huge out here. It helps people learn how to make films, to be filmmakers and directors in various aspects. They cover a lot of things over there. And her website, for everyone who wants to check her out, it is reddirtentertainment.com, and that's REDDIRTENTERTAINMENT.com, reddirtentertainment.com. So go there right now and check it out. It's not completely done, but she does have most of the pages full from what I could see. I don't know what else she's going to add on there, but I found it just a lovely website to get a smile, because on one of the pages, the links, she has a lot of her projects that she worked with people like Florence Henderson, who was from the Brady Bunch. What was her Carol Brady, right? Carol Brady from the Brady Bunch, and also the late great John Cleese from Monty Python, and many other projects that she has on there, which I think that you'd be interested in. And we're going to talk to her about that, and we're going to get to know her right now. She's British. She's lived here for 18 years. She's of Indian descent, which leads me to mentioning that I just saw her DVD trailer of her latest film, Suburban Turban. How cute is that, right? Suburban Turban. It looks fantastic. Very excited. She's going to tell us all about it. So, welcome. Can I call you Aaron? Oh, please let me call you Aaron.
If you
I don't know if I'm going
darling.
to. Well, see, it's like I'm giving you like a new pronunciation, right? Aaron, Arun.
How about Arun?
Arun.
Or Iran. A million miles for one of your smiles.
Uh-oh. I like it. So tell us, give us a little background on you first, about where you come from, what inspired and motivated you to become a producer, director,
or
filmmaker.
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. Thank you very much. It's
Miss
so
V.
wonderful. I have a room with a view, because it is an amazing view out here.
Isn't that
downtown
fantastic?
LA. It's very pretty.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I look at every one of these little windows and I think, oh, I wonder how much the rent on that space is. See, and you look at it for beauty, I'm thinking, how much did they pay for that space? It's just the way I'm thinking, right? So tell us. So you are from England. What part of England are you from? One of my favorite countries, as we were speaking.
Yes, I miss it. I actually, as you said, I'm of Indian descent. So I actually moved to England when I was around 7, 8. And we moved straight to Southampton, which is, now I can say this, which is where the Titanic left. I could never say that growing up or when I first came to New York, because people would be like, Southampton, what? Where?
Right.
So it's now famous for where the Titanic left. And I actually kind of lived in Southampton, did my schooling there, college, and moved to London. And I knew that, definitely growing up in a very traditional Indian family, we would always go and watch Bollywood movies every weekend because it was the only connection we had to the home country, and certainly it was very entertaining, and that's what we did. I grew up with watching a lot of Indian films, and I knew that somehow when I was watching a great scene of these singers and actors dancing through the fields, kind of singing to each other.
I saw Bend It Like Beckham. I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. And I said, I want to do that. I want to do that. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to do that. I wanted to create that feeling for other people. And I just kind of didn't think about it much. And then by the time I moved to London as a young adult, I definitely knew I wanted to be in the media. Like I wanted to do something visual or something around, documentary. And my first job was at network television. I was very blessed. And network television, which is still around now, London Weekend Television, on the South Bank, next to the National Theatre. And that's really where I began my career. I started off as a secretary, an assistant to an executive producer. I worked in the investigative department, kind of like, your version of 2020. It's a news magazine show. There it was Weekend World. I worked on one of the first programs that they had for the gay community, which was called Gay Life. So there's all this groundbreaking stuff that they were doing, and then they kind of created these multicultural sort of programming for the 80s, and those were two shows that they had to cater to the Indian and Afro-Caribbean communities of England, which are huge. As you know, it's a huge population of those people, and that's sort of really how my parents came to England, because there was a huge movement back in the 60s. And so that's kind of how I started my career in television. And I moved my way up in television, sort of learning about production and production coordination, even doing research. And really sort of by the time I left, I knew kind of that I wanted to be a filmmaker. I knew that I wanted to be independent because I was so kind of young and rebellious. I was the only one in my family that kind of left home and told my parents that I was going to go and be a filmmaker. I wanted to go and just work in television. And oh my God, it was like the worst thing I could have done, because they didn't want that, and they actually really were very angry.
Oh yeah. There was a movie where a young Indian girl went through that. I don't think it might have been Bend 'Em Like Beckham, but
Yeah, well, Bend It Like Beckham had that theme where she wanted to play football, soccer, and then her parents wanted her to not do that, basically. They, and it was because it was just,
and I saw how intense
it's too Western.
So you went through the same thing?
I went through that, and and it's, when I went to see Bend It Like Beckham, it was so great. It was such a crowd pleaser. It was a great film. I loved it. It was just great all around, everything worked in it. And I was just sitting there smiling and enjoying it. But deep inside, I was just like, God, I kind of went through like the X-rated version of this because I literally I sacrificed, and I continued sacrificing. Actually, it probably continue in my life thereafter. I continued to sacrifice quite a bit with my family to go for my dreams.
Right.
And they didn't want to have it.
How did you, this is a very good topic to bring up, how did you find strength, especially as a female of Indian descent, to go against your parents' wishes? What was the driving force? I mean, one, you knew, aside from you wanted to be a filmmaker, what would convince you to keep going when they were constantly giving you so much pressure?
Well, yeah, that's a great
and
question.
you obviously
Yeah.
would have had a feeling that you might have been ostracized. I don't know if they do
Well,
that, but
I was ostracized.
you were. Okay.
Yeah, it was, the things that kept me going. I mean, I was much younger, and I was very, very passionate. No one could stop me from having this thing, and I didn't even know that thing, what it was. I didn't know that it was going to be directing eventually. I didn't know it was writing.
Right.
I just knew that I wanted to be involved in filmmaking, that I enjoyed that medium. I enjoyed this whole idea of, expressing, your thoughts and your opinion, and kind of translating that into art,
Right.
and having that freedom and just sort of that openness to do it. And it got me hooked. In television, though, things were still quite, you still had to work to a system. I mean, I was working on a network show that we had a audience, studio audience. It was live. There were things that happened to, had to happen all the time. But what I started to do during that time in television was I started to sort of really realize, well, I love film. I love film. I love this idea of actors kind of doing their thing and what they bring, to a story or to a scene. And I loved music then. I loved world music. And so I actually took the job in television, and it kind of tempered my parents down a little bit.
Yeah, because you were working the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, right?
Exactly. She's got a job.
Exactly.
Very good,
a real
she's
job.
Really making money. And I was making good money.
Smart
and
move.
it kept them quiet.
Very smart.
Yeah. So while I was doing that, I got involved in grassroots documentary filmmaking. I found
behind
people,
their back.
Yeah. I found people that were doing, making movies, but mostly documentary. Film really wasn't a thing then at the time.
At that time, did you feel that you wanted to get into being a writer, producer, director, to tell certain stories about the life of growing up as an Indian in England, or was it not that sort of thing at all? Did you feel you wanted to tell a story because of the confinement that you felt, or was it that you wanted to do stories about other things?
Right. And that's such a great question, because you would think that the answer would be yes. Of course I wanted to, kind of go and tell stories about being Indian. But, in the 80s, in England, the thing wasn't to be Indian. I mean, you wanted to kind of, even though I worked on shows that were, say, really sort of specifically dealing with the issues of the Indian community or the Asian community, because Indians in England are Asians, or the Afro-Caribbean community. It was really kind of dealing with very grassroots issues like health and education, and the whole grassroots stuff. And so the thing was, I wanted to not want that. I mean, I wanted to go and do other things. I wanted to, make other kinds of programs. Like in the network, there were so many other types of programs, very high-profile programs, because I worked for one of the big networks. I wanted to work on those. There was a show called 20th Century Box, and it was hosted by Janet Street Porter, and she was very famous for wearing oversized glasses and funky, spunky colored hair, and she had very, very, buck teeth, and she was very famous then, and she had this show. It was a youth show. It was around music. It was around what was hip at the time and what was going on in London at the time, and it was a really, really great fun show. Well, I wanted to go on and work. I wanted to even maybe be her. I wanted to be on that show. I wanted to be one of the people on that show.
Right.
So so back then you were kind of thinking, I want to just kind of do this other thing. So that and the climate in England at that time versus what it is now, because now, first of all, America is having a love affair with all things Indian. But, by the time I left England or London to come to New York, which we'll talk about, really kind of like 1989, 1990, things started opening up big time for the kinds of movies with leading Indian players. Indian theater and black theater were probably the mainstay of the art world, when I was there and living in London at that time. And I wasn't really involved that heavily in the art, in the theater world. I was, I followed the Black Theatre Cooperative, I followed the Indian arts groups, but I wasn't really looking to get into that world. So I didn't really venture into it in that way. I went to see plays and etc. So by the time I left, things started turning very, very quickly.
So why? So if you're in England, you're doing your thing, you're involved in the grassroots stuff. What was the catharsis that you had to? I have to go to America. What happened? Did you have an epiphany? What happened to you?
Well, unfortunately, the catharsis I had was falling in love with the wrong bloody person. Totally wrong.
That was my whole reason for going to England.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
really interesting.
I mean, it's a long story, and I'll keep it very short. But I did meet somebody. He was very involved in the music world in London, and then I ended up,
He was British or American?
He's American, and he's Black American, and he was living in New York, and really, in the music world in quite a big way. And we actually knew each other for years. Actually for a few years, and so it was this back and forth. So when I started visiting New York, just visiting, he would be involved in his music, and then I would go and get involved in like the local sort of film center or find a filmmaking group, and eventually after several trips I did get involved with a organization in Lower East Side in Manhattan back then it was called Young Filmmakers Foundation. Young Filmmakers Foundation was very popular, very famous. It had been around since like the 70s. And they basically provided a forum for aspiring young filmmakers to basically come and learn some kind of, whether it was directing, screenwriting, editing, shooting. They provided this forum, and they also provided a place for you to come have a conversation about independent film and about, just in a very kind of creative way to talk about film and movies and, So I would go down there on the Lower East Side, when it wasn't a nice place to go in Prince Street. It's different now. And it was wonderful back then. It was very organic, and and I'd go down there and I would hang out there for hours on end. And I suddenly went, these are my people.
I found my calling.
I found my people.
See, now listen to Aaron. She fell in love, came to America. He's long gone by the wayside, but she found herself. So that just goes to prove if you fall in love with someone, you move to another country, they uproot you, there's a reason why you're there. Don't stalk the guy, try to rip his throat out. You're there because you're supposed to be there. Now go find yourself and leave him alone. Let him go back to his wife.
Well,
all right.
So I found my people.
Yeah, found you. She found her
these
people.
Great people, and these great people were like me. They wanted to make movies. They were interested in movies. They loved film. It was just it was like the thing that I needed in England when I was at college and didn't know I could have. Back then I didn't know I could, go and learn to be a filmmaker.
Right.
What a privilege.
Oh.
I argue with my husband right now, Willie. We argue a lot because he went to UCLA. And of course, I'm self-trained.
Self-taught.
I'm self-taught.
That's okay.
So, tease him.
So when you came here and you came here, you said, "Oh my God!" It was like bells going off, hallelujah, and all that. When did you start working on your first project?
Well, my first project, my first big project was that. Cut to a few years later, I was a single parent living in New York.
What from the guy you came? From the guy who brought you here?
I told you,
that's the guy you're still with?
No.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So so the thing is that I ended up having a lovely little baby girl. Her name is Salma. And I had a decision to make because I really didn't come for the American dream.
Right.
I mean, I came because I was an idiot. I
Yeah.
don't know.
So
But,
when you
know,
came here, did back in that time, could Indians come to America and you were legal, or
yeah, well,
how does that work?
Yeah, how it worked was I actually got married in London. I married him in England.
I see.
And we thought, okay, well, maybe England would be a place for a while.
Right.
So we did that for like a year. A year. And during that time, I was pregnant. And then by the time I moved to the States, it takes I now I don't know how long it takes, but back then it took like 2 years.
Wow.
For you to get for you to get all your paperwork in order, blah, blah, blah. So I arrived in New York, and, I'd given up like this great job in television. I'd given up my apartment in South London. I just said, okay, I'm going for it. And of course, there's a whole nother story to this, but my parents were not happy again.
I bet they weren't. When are they ever happy?
Never.
When? They are never going to be happy no matter what you do.
By the end of the show, I may have some
well,
good news.
let's have a happy story
happy.
about the parents. At least one. Okay. So what year are you? What are you talking about?
So we're talking about 1989 now.
90. So we're at 90.
Yeah. So I had my daughter, and I made a decision. I said, okay, I'm going to stay in New York. Let me see. And it was like being thrown to the wolves because I'm telling you,
that's
New
not
York
the.
was...
You don't want to come to New York as an Indian from London right away. We want to throw you in the Midwest, maybe Idaho.
A little bit, right?
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, it was Lord.
Culture shock.
It was a
But then
massive culture shock for me.
I think in 89, 90, as I remember it, there still was a large Indian community in New York.
Here we go. In Queens, New York, there was. But, I didn't know, and I didn't really, and I was a little traumatized because I'd had this baby, and what was I going to do?
And you probably had the postpartum depression thing, which is moving
Oh, you just want to lay that on?
Well, it's true, because, all of those things, that's definitely something that must have happened, because you moved from England, you gave up your job, a good-paying job, your parents are already throwing darts at your picture at nighttime.
Well, there you go.
You're got culture shock.
I had postpartum abandonment. That's what I had, majorly. Right. So I said, well, if I go home, nobody's talking to me now.
Right.
I'm really upset.
What do you have to lose?
And if I stay, it's going to be a struggle.
That's
I stayed. And then I decided I'm a survivor. ARUN VIR is a survivor. And I said, I'm not giving up. And I'm going to make it. Right? Because I'm in New York. I'm going to make it.
You can't make it there. You can't make it anywhere.
So, cut to literally within months, I went down to this organization where I used to go and really hang out and learn and just have fun. And they were looking for a director. They were looking for a media training director. Way, way, way above my head. I was thinking, well, I don't know. And I actually went back and I put a plan together and I went for the interview. And the executive director just fell in love with me, loved my plan, and he offered me the job. And that was my first big job in New York City.
Wow.
And it was a really great job.
Did you tell your parents I got another job?
Well,
it's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. See?
By then, it was kind of too late.
Oh, yeah.
The bleeding had begun.
That's right. They're like, lose my number.
Thank you.
Oh.
Don't phone us again.
No.
Click.
That's right. You have embarrassed the family.
Totally, I had.
Yeah.
So, Young Filmmakers Foundation hired me. They changed their names to Film Video Arts. I had my own office on Broadway and 11th Street. I ran an entire department. My job was to develop and produce programming for aspiring young filmmakers. And that was like,
great.
How better could it get?
I know.
I was so happy. While I was there for a few years. I revamped the program. I just got in some really creative advertising in. it was a non-for-profit, so it was totally run on the NEA and all these other various New York art funding grants and stuff. So I was in charge of an entire department. Film Video Arts Inc., by the way, is still around, so you should go on the website and check them out. Film/Video Arts Inc., and it's on I believe they're in the lower Manhattan. During that time, because I ran these programs and I created some new programs, I introduced documentary filmmaking. We had a filmmaking 1, 2, and 3. We had editing. I got, screenwriters to come and give screenwriting classes. And then one of the things that I did was I said, we need to go out to the community and find these really great indies and get them in here and get them to kind of partner with us to do some low-budget workshops. I was very interested in the low-budget filmmaking sort of thing.
Because being self-taught, that's something that you would want to start from the beginning to get the knowledge.
Exactly, because, in New York, the conversation was always about, it wasn't ever about, I'm going to go and have a meeting at the studio. It was always about, I'm getting my film made. Right. I'm raising money for my film. Or I spoke to so-and-so and, I'm going to, this actor's going to, attach himself or herself to my film. And it was always this great conversation about how people were getting their films made. During that time, I met with Monty Ross, who ran 40 Acres and a Mule for Spike Lee. They made all of his films together early in Spike's career. So they were in Brooklyn, across the bridge, and I invited them, to Film Video Arts. And we had a partnership for a while. They came and Monty gave workshops on a Sunday and it was just great, I met James Seamus, who had produced Poison and, Crouching Tiger. I mean, it's become like this huge, Hollywood producer now. But I went to see James Seamus, and he was living in a hole in the wall in Manhattan with his lovely new baby and his lovely new wife. And I said to him, because they did a thing at the time called Apparatus, and they were doing very well with it. They were going and doing sort of low-budget workshops for people. So we partnered, and we bought their low-budget workshop to Film Video Arts. And really, it was just things like that I did that really kind of brought a lot of attention to Film Video Arts, really kind of put them on the map. And I'm not bragging, but those were things that happened. We did special screenings, of films. I flew in documentary filmmakers from different places. So it was a great time to be creative while I was there.
Plus the learning,
and the learning.
And the networking,
absolutely.
and the marketing.
Yes.
So that background definitely set you up for what you're doing today.
Well, it set me up because by the time I was done with it, I was just like this naturally talented, I would say, producer.
Right.
Like I could produce. I didn't really know that it was really producing. I mean, it was, but not producing in the movie sense. It was just this whole thing about picking up the phone and saying, I want to get this done. How can you help me? And how can I inspire you to help me? Because, if you help me, then, you will benefit from this. And that was, and also having the relationships to do that. So I was building all these great relationships. So by the time I was done, a young filmmaker at Film Video Arts approached me and said, I have a movie that I've written. It's in 2 locations, and we can make it for like no money. Will you produce it? And I said, sure, of course. And I read the script, and it was just 2 locations. It was a bar, and it was mostly outside, and then this, bar in Brooklyn. And he was a first-time director, so that was a little, risky, but I was still willing to do it. Right. And I quit my job.
No!
Yeah, because this